What's up Saab fans around the world, and welcome back to another video. So it's time for part 2 of the engine build, and we got all the parts right now. So now it's time to just throw everything back together and continue the work that we have to do. So I'm going to start with showing you a little bit that I have done meanwhile waiting for parts. So I have cleaned this cover up really nice. It was all black before. This seal down here is a super common problem, that there's leaking oil on the right side of the engine. So this seal is going to be exchanged for a new one. And for the timing chain, here we got the brand new chain, got some new guides for it, and meanwhile I have been waiting. I have done the block off of the oil channel for the balance chain delete. So here I threaded in an M6 and threaded that in with some Loctite. Then I made a plate. Then I made a little hole on the back side of it. So I got it almost like the original tensioner that sits there. And then I throw on some silicone, so there is like a double lock right now. So I have a bolt in the hole, then I have some silicone, and then a plate on top of it. So should be really sturdy right now. So I'm gonna start to install the chain, and I'm gonna show you what to think about and what parts to still have, etc. Because it's really hard to film and mount at the same time because it's so tight down there. So I'm just gonna throw it on, then I'm gonna explain a little bit closer. So new chain versus old chain, and you can see the markings that's on the chain. On this it's like black grayish, but you see you have some points to follow at least. So on the old one there was yellow, and depending on manufacturer there will be different. This one is from Speed Parts. So this is the first marking that we're gonna mock up to, and that is for the lower sprocket. So if you look down here, you can see there is a little notch in the sprocket. There is like the pin where the marking should be, and then we're gonna put on this afterwards so the chain doesn't go anywhere. So now the chain is in place exactly on the dot with the sprocket, and the guides are in place as well. Now it's this little fellow right here that is the like tensioner guide for the balancing chain. Of course you can delete this, but you really need some of it left, because you need to have it as a distance between the guide and the cover, and you don't want to have this flopping around. This is something that everyone has that has just cut the balancing chain without doing anything. So we're just gonna cut this off right here so we don't have this flopping around. We're just gonna use this as a little distance. That's all we need. And I'm really happy right now that I went with a new chain and waited for it to arrive, because it just feels so much better, and new guides. And the top guide right here doesn't do like anything but to keep the other guides in place a little bit. For this one right here, this one it really does nothing but to tighten this down right here. So you definitely need to keep it, and you don't need a new one because it doesn't do anything right now. It's just gonna sit there and protect the timing chain and keep it in place. So now I'm just gonna cut this one off. Then we're gonna start to reassemble the cover, which is a little bit tricky, but I will get back when it's on. So now I have come so far, so the new chain is installed and the balance chain is deleted. So we're just gonna put that to the side for now, but everything looks really fresh. I changed this seal. It's just to pry it out, then take like a pipe that's equally big as this one, like 2.5 inch, and gently knock it into place so we have a fresh seal. And I have installed back the lower pulley, and I have set it into TDC, top dead center. Might be a little bit easier to see now when everything is clean. So now comes the fun part. Everything is back, the transmission mount, the rear engine mount, and the front torque rod is all in place. So the engine hangs by itself right now. So now it's time to hoon the cylinders. So this is a hooning tool with some like grinding stones. So we're gonna try to create like a cross pattern in the cylinders. So these are untouched and this one is hooned. So there is really not much that's needed, just to scuff up the surface a little bit so the new piston rings have something to wear into. So I have dropped down some microfiber cloth to protect the crank so we don't damage it or put like dirt on it. So we're gonna hoon the cylinders, then we're gonna measure the ring gap and prepare the pistons with the new piston rings. So first, hooning. I'm going to show you the installation process of this. So here we have the piston rings, and I have used this brand for all of my builds, and this is the one that Speed Parts sell, and I guess most of the builders in Sweden use this. Anyways, we have 3 rings, and you can see the piston has 3 grooves. So here we have the top one, the middle one, and in the bottom it's a scraper. And the important thing is the middle ring, if you can see it, it has like a little edge, a little groove on it. That should be facing down when mounting and installing, so that's very important. Otherwise, you just turn the opening of the rings should be opposite to each other. So if you have one opening here on the bolt, then the next ring you will turn 180 degrees to the other side so that they don't overlap each other like this. Then you will have a problem. So it should go like this. So we start with the first ring. So there are certain measurements you need to follow. So when it's in the cylinder, these rings have a tolerance of 0.3 to 0.5 millimeters, and also the middle ring. And the scraper ring has a gap of 0.75 to 1 millimeter. So that's important to know. So we're just gonna grab the piston and one of the rings. Then we have this blade measurement to measure the distance, the gap in the ring. So now I'm gonna set up the camera so you see what I'm doing. So what I've done right now, just put some oil on my finger to lube up the cylinder a little bit. so it's not bare metal against bare metal. Then you just take the ring and compress it so you get it into the cylinder. Like so. Then you take the piston and flip it upside down and press it down a little bit. Like so. So it sits flat. I hope you can see the opening. Then you take your measurements and let's see, I'm gonna guess it's 0.4 or something like that. Not even 0.4, so smaller. .3 fits, so maybe 0.35 or something like that, we will see. So then I'm taking 0.3 and 0.05 to get 0.35. Yep, that's it. 0.35, and this is at the top of the cylinder. There could be a lower measurement if you go lower into the cylinder, but if you just measure it at the top, it's perfectly okay. So this is within tolerance and it's perfect. So of course you want as small gap as possible. So 0.3 would be ideal, but since this block has 300,000 kilometers on it, it has been in super good condition, I would say. So 0.35 is really good. So now we will start with the third ring, and it actually consists of like 3 rings, 2 small one and one that's like wavy like this. So we start from the bottom like Drake. So this is just to expand like this and thread on. Then you take one of the other rings, and the trick right here is to put in one side, then to hold it out and let it slide past it. Like so. And the other one should go above it, so it's like a sandwich. Like so. There we have it, the bottom. And now for the middle ring, as I said before, the groove, I don't know if you can see it, should be facing down. On these rings it actually says also, I don't know if you can see it, but it says top, so pretty easy to follow. As I said, one side in first, into the groove, then bend it like out and in. You don't want to scrape too much. And then we flip it to the other side and take the last ring, and this doesn't really matter which way it goes, but stick one end in into the groove like so, pull it out, and then we're just gonna make sure they are opposite to each other. So now we have one opening right here and the other one right here. So now we're just gonna take a compression tool. Of course we're gonna install the bearings first, my bad. But as I said, we started from the bottom, now we're here. This also has a little groove in it. And you can see it has the same in the rod. So just gonna match those up. Like so. Then we're gonna lube this up with some oil before we install it back. And the same goes for this one. Like so, it should like really snap into place. There you have the groove. So this is ready to go in. Before we put it in, just lube this up a little bit. So when it comes to dropping them in, using a little compressor to push in the rings to keep them tight together. There are a lot of different variation of this tool right here. Lubed up the bearing before you drop it in, and also the lower part of it. Then it's really important to get this correct. It needs to be placed at a certain way. So we have this cut out right here, which is for the oil feed that's down there. First time I did this build, I rotated them the wrong way without checking. I didn't know really what that was for. So I had an arrow on my piston and I twisted it the wrong way. It said the transmission and I thought, yeah, that's the gearbox. But the transmission side is that side right there. So make sure you get them the correct way. Then it's just to drop them in. Use a little rubber mallet to just tap them in slightly. And yeah, then just thread on the bolts. And we will drop in everyone before we torque down the moment. And as you can see, here is the little arrow that I was talking about, pointing towards the transmission. Since I don't have a tripod yet, I'm just gonna take the long torque wrench, and it's set to 48 Newton meters, which is the torque of the rods. So I'm gonna do that and continue with the rest of them. And you don't have to see that because you have seen the whole process of one. So now it's just to copy and do the same to the others. T5 piston and rods successfully installed in the block. Torque down to the spec, 48 Newton meters. I had an old instruction said 20 Newton meters plus 70 degrees. That was from some kind of form or old Saab instructions. But 48 Newton meters should be the torque. So here we have the refurbished head. So now we're gonna prep this one. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I ordered a race thermostat from Speed Parts. So this opens at 75 degrees Celsius. So we're gonna upgrade this while we have everything loose. Then I'm going to reinstall the intake manifold and the exhaust manifold. We are not going to run the new exhaust manifold as of right now. I'm going to clear the car through inspection first, then we're going to continue with those mods. But to start off, new thermostat. So it's really easy to just undo this right now where we have everything loose. have opened up the cylinder head a little bit. So I have just grinded out this a little bit because you don't want this to stop the airflow when we have put in all the work on the cylinder head. And for the exhaust side, Speed Parts has a gasket that is specially made for ported cylinder heads, so the openings are quite a lot bigger. So this is just a bolt on. Usually the nut don't come loose, but you rather snap the whole stud. So I'm just gonna exchange these ones to some stainless steel screws instead, so we don't have to bother with them anymore. And it actually looks a lot cleaner with these bolts in instead of the studs just sticking out. These are easy accessible. So now we're gonna lift in the cylinder head to the engine bay, and soon it's gonna start to look like an engine again. So first we're gonna place in the new head gasket. It's always a little bit tricky to get everything in place because there's cables, there's vacuum hose, and you need to get the head gasket right and everything. So now at least it's matched up. So now we're gonna install some new head studs or head bolts. Brand new, because you can't reuse the old one, because they are stretched and they are out of order, so you need new ones so you get the correct tension. So at first I just made sure that all the screws or bolts just threaded in perfect. So now we're gonna start. There are 10 bolts, so we're gonna start in a pattern like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. And the first torque round, or what we should call it, is 40 Newton meters. Then we start all over again, 60 Newton meters, and then a third time we do 90-degree turn. So 40, 60 and 90 degrees. That's the torque for the head. So the cylinder head is on. It's a little bit tricky. You have to wiggle and get it in place and make sure that the head gasket is perfectly seated so it doesn't move to the side or anything, but everything is on point right now. So now it's time to drop in the lifters or the tappets, install the B202 cams. But we are going to do one thing first, and the cams, the B202 cams, they are not 100% perfect when it comes to the timing of the engine. They are a little bit off in the timing, so if you just drop them in and use the markings that you should use, so when you're timing the cams you could follow this marking right here. If you are using standard stuff, we are using the B202 cams that are a little bit off. So we are going to do a little bit of custom timing. And to do that, we're gonna need to have adjustable sprockets. So the standard one has a little notch right here, so it can't move, you can't do it wrong. So if you follow all the markings on the chain and everything, then it will be 100% perfect. You can follow the instructions on saabwisonline.com. And in my case this is a little bit of custom work, because if you drop in the B202 cams as it is, the car will be really slow in the low end of the register. Or not slow, but you won't have that low end torque, but you will have a lot of gain in the top register, but it's going to be a very nice curve. Let's say it's not that aggressive. So if you want to have the full potential of the cams, you have to do a little bit of custom timing to them. Then you will have the aggressive rev in the low range and a super good register on the top. So that's what we're aiming for. So I'm just grinding this away. If you have a workshop or a machine shop, you could machine it away, but it's just so the sprocket could spin freely when we're setting the timing. So now I have torqued down the camshafts, and I did it in a previous video as well, but they should be torqued to 15 Newton meters. And you start from the middle and then you go out and work your way around like clockwise. And it's really important, there are stance numbers in these that should match the number in the cylinder head, so you get everything correct. And you also have two different color of the bolts, so they should be in this order. The little bit more like lighter one outside and the darker one inside, and the same for the other side. Then I highly recommend you to look up on a regular like saabwisonline.com to make sure that you get your timing right, whatever you're using. So as of right now I have just pulled on the chain, so I have full tension from the sprocket down up to the exhaust side, then as much tension as I can to the intake side, and the slack is between the intake side and the sprocket, so when we insert the tensioner that will pick up all the slack. So as of right now they are just twisted in by hand, and with the mod that we did before they can spin freely, so I can adjust and measure in the timing. So I'm gonna start with the exhaust side, and this is particularly for B202 cams on a Saab 9.5. So to get a pretty good, decent all-round setting, you measure on the fourth cylinder or the lifters. So now I'm gonna measure where it starts to lift, push down. So it's going to be 1.2 millimeters on the exhaust side. When we have it on 1.2 millimeters, I'm gonna tighten down the sprocket so it holds the timing right there. Then I'm gonna tension this up. You can see I can adjust this however I want to. There is nothing you can do otherwise. So on the intake side it should be 1.5 millimeters, and I'll measure on the fourth cylinder. So I'm gonna do this off cam because it's the first time I'm doing it, and this is a pretty stressful job, and it's not super important that you get like on the dot 1.2 millimeters. If it's 1.19 it's okay also, like there are some tolerances, but get as close as possible. So I'm gonna take my time and measure this really carefully and try to get it right, and I will see you afterwards. So now I'm done with setting the timing, and I got full tension on the chain here. It's a little bit of slack here, but that's always like this. Usually it's a little bit more when you have the standard timing set on the chain, and as I said before, if you're running like B234 cams, it's just a drop in and follow the marking and your timing will be good. You don't have to grind out anything. This is purely custom, so this is nothing that I recommend anyone doing, but if you want to do it, here you go. Here's the trick. So right now we're gonna pop in the tensioner, and I also installed seal on this one because this is also a common leakage point, pushes out some oil. So first in with this one, then the spring, so it will pick up the tension, and usually it don't like push out directly, but when you start to turn it's like ding, then you hear it. So now we're going to install that, then we're going to rotate the engine a little bit manually to see that everything works. So usually you rotate it like 2 laps to see that nothing interfering, so the valves are clear from the pistons, etc. So that's up right now. So the tensioner is in. The engine has been in TDC, top dead center, all the time. So now it's time to rotate this. Just follow the marking on the pulley and rotate it 2 laps, or 2 rotations, so we see that everything goes. This looks so nice. I'm so happy right now that I went for the new chain. Feels so good. So time to rotate and we will see how it goes. That went super smooth, so now it's just to start to reassemble everything. There are a couple of things more that is important to think about. This oil pipe needs new O-rings, which I have here, and the pickup pipe that's right here in the oil pan, new O-ring for that as well. Here's the seal for the valve cover that I have painted. This is a matte black heat resistant paint, so I painted the whole cover. Then I just grinded on top of the leathers, which gets really nice. You get that pretty thick satin like OEM look. Before it was like corroded, you will see in the video if you watch from the beginning to the end. And I have some other parts right here painted, and I painted this to make it a little bit more fresh around the engine bay. So when you install this one underneath the valve cover, use a little bit of silicone, just a little bit, to keep it in place, because when you flip this upside down, it's super easy that it slips somewhere and not get a perfect seal. I have done it before, and it ended up costing me a little bit of money because I thought the engine was leaking from somewhere on the backside, since I had just built the engine. But it turned out that the seal just had jumped out of place right here, and when I torqued it down I cracked it, so there was a little leak down here, and it splattered all over the backside of the engine. So it was really hard to find, and when I found it I was like, damn, that was too easy. So be sure to like glue it in or something to like attach it to the valve cover a little bit. You can also use this silicone that you use for the oil pan to seal that off. Put just a little bit right over here, down here in the groove, and also the same on this side. Then you will have a super tight engine that is not leaking oil anywhere, because it's super common that it just zippers out a little bit right here. So try to fix that before also, then you will be a happy Saab owner. I'm so hyped. It's winter outside, but I need to go drive this car with a perfect seal on the exhaust and everything, because every time I have run this car it has had this blown gasket on the exhaust manifold. And as I said before, this is not the final version. This is to get through inspection, and after inspection we will do fun stuff like blow off valve. We're gonna install the new exhaust manifold with a higher flow. We are going to install the new turbo, the GTX 287067R Gen 2. That's going to push a lot over 500 horsepower if in the right engine, so we will see, but the goal is 500. So if we end up being close to that, that's a good thing. So now I'm gonna just try to install everything back, and this is really not fun to watch. I have new pulleys and I have the new serpentine belt. The old one went down here to an idler pulley, but I deleted that one and just installed an M8 bolt and just some Loctite. So the new routing is a shorter one and it will just go straight over, and it's a good upgrade to do if you have a Saab 9.5 that's older than 2005 or something like that, 2004, 2005. So this had the old routing, now it will get the new one as well. So I think I would do a little time lapse when I install everything back, otherwise you will see the first start attempt. So install everything back, refill the coolant, new oil. So will be quite exciting. This is also always so nerve-wracking, because it still are parts all over the floor, but basically the whole engine was spread out all over the garage. So to have this running is just an accomplishment by itself. So I flipped the valve cover and I noticed that I haven't shown you this either. I changed this one. This is a rubber like patch to stop like noise from the chain. Sometimes it could hit this, and the old one was like rock solid plastic. So when I tried to bend it out, it just broke, snapped in half. This is also good if you want a quiet, nice new engine. Change this one as well. Could give you some bad noises sometimes. Fast forward, and this is so sick. Everything put together. Major hours has been spent getting all this together. We have the new chain, the refurbished cylinder head, everything. As I said before, this is the original manifold and this is just temporarily. We're gonna fix another one after inspection, but as of right now, everything together. I'm gonna fill up the coolant and pour in some new fresh oil. We are going to put in the battery. We're going to crank the engine, the starter engine, a couple of laps so the engine gets primed with a little bit of oil. Then we're going to install the spark plugs and the new cassette, and hopefully she fires up, but we will see. All these hours, now everything is back together and it looks like a proper engine again. So now we're just gonna start off the car and see if there are any leaks or anything. And the coolant is gonna suck into the engine, so you have to refill this after a little while, but this is nerve-wracking. So we try to start it and let it idle for a bit. There might be some knocking, and that is perfectly fine when the engine is running new and the tappets don't have oil pressure yet, so we will see. Alright, take two with another battery. smoking hot. So the steam or the smoke that came from the exhaust manifold is just paint that like disappears immediately. I just wanted it to look a little bit nice when installing. I was well aware that it's going to start smoking, but the other smoke inside here that came from the exhaust was that I hadn't installed the crankcase ventilation, so I was running an open crankcase ventilation, which is not ideal. That's why all of this smoke. But it started, it was ticking a little bit, but just give it a few revs and let it idle for a while, then it would be perfect, I think. So as of right now it's the first start, so it needs to adapt and everything, but yeah, it runs and it doesn't leak anywhere. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and liked it a lot. It's somewhat educational at least. So to the problem right here, I forgot to attach the crankcase ventilation into the valve cover, and that is actually one of the pieces that I bought a new one that I was supposed to replace, but it was not in stock for now, so that's something that I'm waiting for. But I attached my old one again. So there is always something when you do this. The whole floor has been covered in parts and bolts and stuff everywhere, so it's not uncommon that you miss a little piece. First time that I built an engine, I got everything back and the car wouldn't start. Got a check engine light straight away, so I have forgot to reattach one little ground in the engine bay. So this time it was the crankcase ventilation, but it's an easy fix. The engine runs, so I'm super hyped about this, and this is just the beginning. Now we have a built engine that could handle a lot of power. So now in the next step I'm gonna get this car through inspection, then we're gonna redo some stuff. We're gonna install another exhaust manifold, the bigger turbo, a bigger fuel pump. We are going to get another tune, so hopefully we will end up on the right side of 500 horsepower, or at least around that area. So the goal with this series is that you could follow from the start, from the beginning to the end, and do this yourself. So I hope you guys like this video. Please subscribe to the channel and I will see you in the next one. Bye!